Hello and welcome to the Healthy Living Doesn't Have to Suck podcast. My name is Melyssa Allen, and I'm a double board certified lifestyle medicine coach who's dedicated to helping people drop the struggle around creating a healthy lifestyle that lasts. Join me for solo episodes and casual conversations with guest experts in the industry to discuss creating mindset and behavior changes that help you say hello to healthy living made easy, enjoyable, and empowering. Hey y'all, welcome back. I am so excited to be back here with you all after a short little break that I decided I needed to give myself for a little bit of time. April was chaos, let me tell you, in the best and worst ways possible, right? So we'll catch up at another time, but I wanted to just pop in really quick and let you know that this episode kicks off Mental Health Awareness Month. At the time I'm recording this, it's May 6th. So I wanted to just kind of preface this with these episodes this month are going to be focused on breaking the stigma, because that is part of my mission in life, is to normalize that it's okay that we struggle sometimes. It's only temporary. If we have the right support systems around us and we learn how to better support ourselves through difficult times, then we can learn how to overcome some of these barriers that we might impose on ourselves at times. And especially with this conversation, we're talking a lot about grief and loss. So I just wanted to share that that's a little bit of a sensitive content warning for this episode. You know, just trying to give y'all a heads up, but it's full of value. I knew I was going to cry in this conversation with Annalise. I shared that with her before we even started recording. I was like, I have a feeling at some point I'm going to cry, because I knew that we would probably end up talking about Buddy. And that was just such a relevant example for me to share, because to this day, like, it still feels very fresh at times. And I think that's something that we don't talk a lot about with grief and loss. And in this conversation today, we do get into some of the nitty-gritty details and ways that we can better work through and process our grief as it's happening. So I hope that you will find this conversation helpful. And just really quickly, got to add a disclaimer, y'all. Even though Annalise is a clinical psychologist, this episode is for educational purposes only. All right. We are not your providers. So if you find that you are struggling or facing challenges, make sure that you reach out to your mental health provider, your primary care physician. And if you find yourself in crisis, remember that within the United States, 988 is the crisis lifeline for support. So there you go. Now that we've got all of our housekeeping out of the way for this episode, let's get into my conversation with Dr. Annalise Cunningham. Welcome back, Changemakers. I cannot wait for y'all to listen to this episode with us today, because I am joined by a very special guest, Dr. Annalise Cunningham, and her and I connected because for a very short time in the chapters of our lives, our paths crossed because we were enrolled in the same graduate program. And from there, our lives just kind of took on a direction of their own, and we both ended up, I think, where we were supposed to be. And I am so excited to share her with you all today. So, Annalise, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited. And when I have flashbacks to those moments, it's wild, because I feel like even at that time, part of our connection was always about what we wanted to do for people, and how we always aligned in thinking very much outside of the box.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what brought us closer together. So I would love for our listeners to get to know a little bit more about you. So can you share kind of part of your story, how you got to be where you are today?
Oh, okay. So I, as mentioned, went to a graduate school program and pursued my doctorate in a pretty unique area of clinical psychology, really working with infant mental health and attachment and really psychodynamic relational kind of approaches to mental health. And I always had in my mind that I wanted to work with babies, which people looked at me pretty sideways. What are you going to do? How do babies do therapy? I got all of these jokes, and I was really driven to understand hard things, how
Mm.
hard things impact how we live life. And I couldn't think of a much harder thing than pregnancy and parenting and the infant developmental stages and
Mhm.
newborn and all of this stuff. And it kind of guided me towards linking these worlds together: trauma, parenting, pregnancy, attachment, which led to an even more bizarre place that I wanted to land, which was inside of a NICU, because I thought, why is there not mental health support inside these places where trauma is happening? Unexpected experiences are happening. There's a
Right.
lot of loss and control in there. And with that loss and control came a lot of work around death and
Mhm.
grief.
Mhm.
And I never quite really fit in anywhere, Melyssa. You know this. I never
Yeah.
quite fit in at adult hospitals because I wanted to talk about the babies. I never quite fit in at children's hospitals because I wanted to include the adults.
Mhm.
I never quite fit in the NICU because more work needed to be due than I was allowed to do bedside when I'm just making my rounds. And
Right.
so that led me to my most current chapter, which is I kind of left all of the institutional stuff to start private practice. And
Mhm.
that's where I live. I kind of live in this virtual area that's really tailored for people centered care, whether
Mhm.
that's really focused on trauma, grief, and loss, and how all of our relationships and what's happening inside of those relationships, the past, the present ones, the ones we desire for the future, how our relationship quality influences our mental health. So I took
Mhm.
all the things that I liked, left all of the things that I didn't, and opened up shop.
Ugh, I love that so much. Yes, like create what you wish existed in the world, right? Which I know that's one of the reasons why I wrote my book. And you forgot to share, you wrote a book too.
Yeah. So along that journey of what don't I like? Why isn't this feeling right?
Mhm.
I found myself, and I'd love to hear your take on it, but I found myself so frustrated with the inadequacies. And for the listeners, I really mean that: inadequate and insufficient, and just not fucking enough of the
Yes.
research and the work available for grief. It always fell short to me. Like the stages of grief, and it's this nice clean structure, and people just saying I'm sorry all the time. And it's just this space that's really uncomfortable, but so special and intimate that it deserves more than what is available out there on it. And so, with my privilege in mind of the clients that I privileged by the clients that I've been able to share with my experience and exposure to death, I made a journal workbook, and it is beautifully and politely titled Grief is Fucking Hard. And it is just an honest place to sit with your grief. And
Mhm.
it's very unapologetic, and it's reflective, and it's personal, and it's intimate.
Yeah.
And that is such a heart project of mine. Of
Mhm.
I wanted people to have something that resonated, because I think so much that's out there is so structured and well intended, but done from
Yeah.
such a kind of academic, sterile place, that when we're in such an intimate, raw, intense experience, it feels like somebody's reading you a script. It feels
Mhm.
like somebody is just pulling, oh, somebody's died. This is what I'm supposed to say. And
Yeah.
it just leaves the receiver of that very isolated and very, very inadequate. The conversations around it are really inadequate. So I hope that that
Right.
journal not only provides people with an intimate space,
Mhm.
a raw space, but it also has places for you to create what's missing. And I have in my book
Yeah.
for people to email me if I've missed something or something that they would like to
Right.
see. And it's so wonderful to get those messages of just really the individual experience of grief. So yes, there is a workbook out there. Grief is fucking hard.
I love it. And I will be the first to admit, like, as soon as we had to put Buddy down, I went and bought the book. I I cracked it open, I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks after, and I was like, "Nope, not ready yet." And I think that's something that society is really bad about, is that, like, they think that there's supposed to be some sort of timeline around grief and like how you work through and navigate those emotions. And just kind of like you were sharing, we try to intellectualize that experience a lot. And I am so guilty of that because we want to make sense of it, but that's just not how it works. So it's very fucking messy and it is fucking hard. And I'm so glad
Right.
that we're recording this episode during Mental Health Awareness Month because people need to know this.
And I love what you said because it's so human. We want to make sense of it. And I think that's what I want to share with the world is that it doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense that someone so important in our lives, someone so significant, a relationship so special, and sometimes a relationship so complicated, just
Mhm.
significant in some way. We want to make sense. The brain is designed to create a story. The brain is designed to create perceived control. And
Mm.
you know what? Grief doesn't care about control. Like
Right.
good try, but I'm not going to fit in this nice little box that you've idealized me to go into.
Mhm.
I don't follow order and I don't really give a damn what you've read about me because I'm going to show up in you and in a reflection of the relationship you've lived. And
Mm.
that's unique. And
Yeah.
although it's painful, although it's uncomfortable, I want to empower people to lean into that because you also have an intimate experience of love in that relationship. So,
Mhm.
in opening that book and then closing it back up, the more you allow yourself to kind of peek and wade into the water, you really get to feel all of the emotions involved with your loss.
Mhm.
It starts out kind of painful,
Oh,
but
yeah.
if you let yourself wade in, you get to know that pain and you get to know that sadness and you get to know that that sadness is quickly linked to desire and love and joy sometimes and silliness and laughter.
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely something where, again, I will be the first to admit I am a total avoidance queen when it comes to things that I know are gonna suck, that they're gonna be painful, they're gonna bring up some of those really difficult and uncomfortable emotions. I don't like to call them negative emotions, right?
Oh,
Because,
me too. Yeah,
like,
I like
yeah, they're emotions. They're giving us information, like, they're there for a reason. And I don't think a lot of people connect the dots on why a conversation like this is so important when it comes to healthy living. So, can you share a little bit about how managing these emotions and working through and navigating these challenges in life can actually help us to live healthier and happier?
Mm. I would just like everyone to that's listening. Melissa knows I love a good reflective exercise, but I would
Oh,
just
yes.
like people that are listening, if it feels safe enough to do so, uh, connect with something that you've lost, connect with something unexpected in your life. And how you react right now in this moment, just kind of hold on to it while I keep talking with my annoying voice, but try to connect to that loss. And sometimes we approach that feeling with, how do I make this go away? I'll be better when I stop feeling this. And that resonates for me for sure. And you mentioned avoidance, but how do I make this go away? And I would say navigating life with trauma and grief while also trying to be healthy. The first thing we all have to talk about here is we're in the wrong damn business if we're trying to make this go away.
Yeah. Yes.
We're really going to be disappointed in that workout or that walk if, well, I did it and I still feel, well, why would I go work out? It didn't fix it. It didn't
Mm.
solve it. And so I think setting the stage for that feeling or feelings, we're not trying to get them to go away, but I like to think about it like we're doing the laundry.
Yes.
And there's always laundry to be done. You don't
Uh-huh.
do laundry and you're like, I did it. Laundry's done. I never have to be
Never
overwhelmed with
again.
clothes or do it again. But I think when you try to imagine health in the midst of trauma and despair and grief, you think about doing the laundry. And
Mm.
sometimes we do a really small load, right? Sometimes it's like, all I got in me is the underwear I need tomorrow. Like, that's it.
Yes.
That's what I got. And the mountain of clothes is still there. And sometimes today I'm going to do a couple loads. Sometimes check me out. I did all of my laundry. Has it been
Right.
folded? Maybe not. But maybe another analogy for the listeners will come to mind, but laundry works for me because it's a cycle.
Yeah.
And I want to normalize how hard it can feel to come up with an answer to make such important emotions go away.
Mm,
And we want them to go away because we want to feel better and we want to feel relieved and we want to know that we're not stuck. And feeling our feelings while also doing the laundry is how we get unstuck. It's
mhm,
making these little moments of, I'm going to take myself on a walk, not because it's going to make my heart stop hurting,
mhm.
but because it's a load, it's a cycle. And
Yeah.
it's helping my brain regulate. It's helping the neurotransmitters in my heart regulate while I carry these special emotions.
Mm,
And you're right, I called them special. And you might be listening, being like, you know what, I've been in this grief or I've been going through a really hard situation. And never once did I consider to call it special. And
mhm.
I think that too. So the language that you use around your emotions when you're trying to also live a healthy lifestyle, are you using words like negative or I hate this feeling or what's wrong with me or when will it stop? That's all resistance. And
Mhm.
resistance, I know you know way better than me, resistance leads to more cortisol and difficulties with our muscles and our digestion and our metabolism. So, one, we're in the wrong business if we're trying to make them go away. Two, think about it cyclic, like you're
Mhm.
doing the laundry and your load can look however you need it to look that day.
Yeah.
And then three, consider how are you talking about these emotions that are so special? And are you inviting them in to be a part of your life? And this is a time where you might be like, who is this quack? My emotions are special and I need to build a relationship with them. Yeah, you
Yeah.
do. You need to learn your anxiety and learn your pain and learn what it feels like to feel heartbreak and
Mm,
despair
mhm.
and find what is the load of laundry you need to do when those emotions come on board. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, and even with the resistance, I mean, there's that famous phrase, "What we resist persists," because truly, like, the more that we try to fight it, all of our attention is focused on that thing that we don't think we want to feel, and yet we're putting all of our attention and focus there. The other thing that you said too was just about how special it is because when we're feeling grief, it's because we loved something so much. And I have found that again, there's no timeline, right? But it has taken me a very long time to I think it's long. It's been months, right? So, let's see. May 16th will be 8 months that we haven't had Buddy physically in our lives. And during that time, I noticed I was avoiding teaching my virtual fitness classes because I was just looking at other um like Instagram reels back in like my archives even when we weren't in this house, we were in our last house and ooh, it's
Oh,
coming. Yeah, it's coming up. And it was just so amazing to have him there during those classes that for me to have to work through Matt not letting him out of the sliding glass door to come join me for the cool
mhm.
down and to know that
Yeah.
even for my personal workouts, he was always there inside the house on the patio
Mhm.
and just learning how to I mean, obviously I'm still working through it. So, I hope that this is helpful for people to hear because
And to
it
normalize it, right?
yes, like it's fucking hard. It's fucking sad and it is really amazing to have those memories. And yes, they cause pain, but they also make me smile at the same time. And
Mm,
that's something I think a lot of people struggle with is the conflicting emotions that we sometimes experience and learning just how to make space for all of it.
mm.
However messy it is.
Yeah, I'm being such a therapist, I'm, like, taking notes on what you're saying so I
I
can,
love it. Oh my god,
uh,
please.
make sure that I respond to these beautiful points that you've made, but I think first I want to talk about procedural memory, and then I want to talk about duality.
Ooh,
So,
ooh, I
per-
love the terminology around it. Yes, let's get in it.
so your emotion came up when you were describing the procedural memories in your nervous system, which, by the way, is our attachments, listeners. Our attachments live in our procedural memory
I love
of
this.
this relationship that she has with Buddy has procedural memories and built into her nervous system of what your framework is for working out. So, your
Yeah.
framework for working out involves sounds from him, sights of him,
Yep.
maybe his body coming to lay on your mat, or you
Yes.
saying, get out of the way, or you knowing at a certain part of the cool down that he's going to come join you. So
Right.
your working model for, or your script, your expectation for working out involves lots of procedural data that
Yeah.
he should, and I use that word intentionally, he should be here.
Right.
Your brain says he should be here. So the idea of doing that thing, and I'm missing such an integral part of what my nervous system data holds, it feels so different.
Yeah,
It
and it
feels
feels
foreign.
wrong almost, like there's still something wrong, like I haven't
Mhm.
gotten used to it or, found a way
Exactly.
to not even get closure around it, but, like, there are times where, like, I'll be just laying on my mat and I'll close my eyes, and I swear, like, I feel his presence
You do. Your
just
nervous system
yeah,
does.
yeah, he's just,
Absolutely.
like, chilling there with me, like, "All right, great job, mom, you did your workout," like
Absolutely. And so you said get used to it. The scientific place for that, the term would be habituation. So
Mhm.
we have to build new models for the things that we're now missing procedural data for. And I say that to say, not because of, I want you to hear all that boring stuff, but I say that to say, give yourself time and grace, and don't expect it to feel like it did, because it's literally new ways of engaging. So it will feel different, and it should feel different, because a
Right,
very important part is not here
yeah.
physically. And giving yourself permission to design and get to know working out in a different procedural capacity.
Mm. Yes. I love
And then the
that.
second thing you said that I loved was duality. And for us humans, it's so hard to say that more than one thing can be true at the same time, right?
Right. Yes. There is room for the and. It doesn't always have to be or.
And, healthy living doesn't have to suck. And sometimes it's really fucking hard,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The duality of something can be beneficial and really difficult.
Mhm.
Something can be boring and soothing. Something can be
Yeah.
painful and restorative.
Mm.
Something can be uncomfortable and exciting.
Yeah.
And grief loves duality. We don't, but grief does.
Right.
And getting to know your grief while also balancing healthy living and those things, like getting myself to do the workout, or
Mhm.
thinking mindfully about what I'm eating or how I'm moving my body or whatever it is, or even medication management. We want to avoid, we want to quit, we want to pull away, because
Right.
that is, how do I want to say that? That is conducive or similar to the model that your brain's holding. Your brain is saying, I'm uncomfortable, I'm sad, I'm tired. So what goes with that? Not activity, avoidance,
Right.
isolation,
Ah, yes.
nothing, stillness, nothingness, which there's a time and place for that. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
And knowing, even though I'm in this place of pain, can I bring in duality for movement being my medicine? Can I bring in
Mhm.
duality for going to do something like taking myself on a walk or listening to
Yes.
music or calling up a friend? Not because I want to, because you don't want to,
Right.
but because my brain needs me to.
Mhm. Mm. I love that so, so much, and I know that our listeners are probably, gonna go back and listen to this and maybe take some notes for themselves too, or think about how this can relate to things that they've experienced in their lives. So that was absolutely amazing for our educate part of the podcast. And if there's anything that you want to add into that, please feel free to. But I think I would love to know, like, how can we feel empowered around like giving ourselves grace? First of all, I love that you said that. I've tried to make that my theme for this year.
And
But
can
also,
you share how that's going? Like how has it gone to especially I think you are so brilliant and you are so capable and competent. I know that that sometimes comes with setting pretty high standards for the self.
yes. Mhm.
What's that been like to try that out? To say like I'm making room for grace.
Mm. It
Right.
definitely feels very foreign. Because even when I think about grace and like handing things gracefully, um, I think about it in terms of like doing it well. Like I want to be good at being graceful in handling this. So yes, the high standards are definitely there, and I think it adds an extra layer because of the training that we have, to think like I have all of these different tools and skills that I've learned, and whether that's through my clinical training or going to therapy myself, and sometimes I feel like even those don't support me in the way that I'm looking for. Just having to really take that step back and say
Mm,
like, and that's okay right now. Like
mm.
really tapping into the self-compassion has been difficult, but an awesome learning experience. And it's given me a new perspective on a lot of things that I don't think I would have the insights in not going through what I've just gone through,
And
especially around the attachment.
I'm gonna get a little hippy dippy on you. And
Oh
you
my
just
god, please.
said what
Yes.
you just said my favorite word, attachment. And I think what I so fiercely believe in is those moments that you do say, and that's okay. You are learning a new part of yourself, and you're learning
Right.
the part of yourself that isn't tied to self esteem being related to production
Mhm.
and effectiveness,
Mm.
because we all have that. But we live in a world that really works out that muscle, the effectiveness, productive, what do you got to show for it muscle. But
Yes.
crazy. I know we weren't designed to do that.
What?
That's a socially constructed and encouraged part of
Yes.
our identity and our ego. And the more that we give ourselves the opportunity to say, and that's okay.
Mhm.
I'm gonna rest. I am sitting in my emotions. I'm
Right.
not focused on fixing it or solving it.
Mm.
You learn that part of Melyssa. You learn that part of you that needs you to
Right.
also let them be active. That part of me is important too and has a different type of confidence and a different type of skill set to be steady in the midst of the urgency to do that comes with anxiety.
Yes. And I think this part of me, like, I've done a very good job in the past of, like, pushing that part so far down and out to the side by just throwing myself into work. And I have caught myself doing that quite a bit over the last few months, just because I wanted to be distracted. I didn't want to take that time to slow down, because anytime I took that time to slow down, it would mean that those emotions would come up. And so I was
Mhm.
just trying to do anything that I could just to, make it through at that point, but knowing logically that I'm causing myself more pain over time.
Mm.
But in that moment, that was what I turned to. And sorry, I'm calling you out, mom, but that's how I always saw my mom deal
Mhm.
with things, deal with challenges, deal with loss and grief. And so it's definitely taken me to be more intentional and mindful and aware of
Mm.
when I'm falling into that pattern, so that I can say, "Oop, see, I'm getting all like worked up and throwing my microphone all over the place." I was gonna say, time out, Melyssa. Like we're doing too much. You're
Mm.
exhausted. Not you're not being productive because you're just being busy.
Mm. I love that. And for the listeners, hearing you reflect out loud on that, I also want to invite people to consider the magic that's in there when we build a relationship with our vulnerability, because that's what you're doing. You're allowing yourself to get to
Yes.
know your vulnerability, and vulnerability for everyone listening, is scary and
Yes.
it's uncomfortable
Oh, yeah.
and it's a helpless feeling. And the more time you spend in your vulnerability, the more you will feel empowered to bring it back to empowerment. That learning and getting to know intimately your vulnerability and your emotions, the better you know them, the
Mm,
more time you spend with them, you will have a byproduct of empowerment because you learn, I don't need to run. You
yeah.
start to learn, oh, I know this. Hi, grief. Come on in. Hi, busyness. Come on
Yep.
in. I
Mhm.
know you. And now the goal is, what is the load of laundry I need to do?
Mm. That's what I was just gonna ask is what are some of your favorite questions to ask yourself or to ask your clients to create that space of reflection?
Yeah. One, I hope my clients hear this and they're probably rolling their eyes because I say so much to them in a given session. What do you need? And they hate that question sometimes, especially when you're at the beginning of spending time with yourself and learning yourself. Like, I don't know what I need. You tell me.
Right.
That's why I'm coming to you. What you tell me what I need. But
Mhm.
really reflectively asking yourself, what do I need? And
Mm.
again, it's not the full sentence, is it what do I need to make this stop? It's what do I need to feel empowered to
Mhm.
feel this in a safe way? And you mentioned survival, and there's a time and place for distraction of
Mhm.
getting through the day.
Right.
But in terms of self reflection, what do I need?
Mm.
What do I need? And where am I at? And then because I study attachment and work so
Mhm.
much with it, a question I really ask myself and encourage other people to ask is, what version of me is this? Is this
Mm.
Is this coming from a place of previous wound? Because you mentioned experiences with your parent, and
Mhm.
that is so very real, especially when we're in a time of vulnerability. We
Yeah.
can revert back to, again, what is our nervous system familiar with? And it can be
Yes.
familiar with really unhealthy, difficult, reactive behaviors and thoughts about our emotions that we're feeling. And so I self check myself in that way of, wait a
Mhm.
second, who's responding right now? Is it me, or am I coming from a place of pain? Am I coming from
Mhm.
a place of embarrassment? Am I coming from a place of discomfort? Discomfort's a big one because
Yeah.
discomfort for me, usually for my loved ones, results in anger and irritability. Like I just want to be short and I want to be in
Yes.
control and hyper independent. So I ask myself,
Guilty.
what version of me am I dealing with? And again, the more time that we spend with ourselves, we learn, where am I at? Who's
Right.
responding? And what does that emotional need best respond to? Sometimes it's
Mhm.
movement, sometimes it
Yeah.
is busyness, sometimes it's conversation and relationship. But I just
Yeah.
encourage to start asking questions to get to know you.
I love that so, so much. And for people who may want to start kind of exploring what that looks like, we kind of wrap up the podcast with like the engage section, right? So these are like tangible tips that people can take to kind of step into some of the things that we've been talking about. So what would be some of your suggestions for people who are interested in like starting to dip their toes in the water of attachment and
Mhm.
grief and things like that?
Yeah, there's so much out there on attachment and like what attachment style are you? There's free tests that you can take, but I think finding out your attachment style is helpful. Just
Mm,
whether you do that with a professional or you do that with an online quiz, but just reading, and do I lean more avoidant? Do I lean more anxious?
mhm.
What is my relational style? And I think getting a journal, and this is where you're like, okay, breathe and get a journal. Every therapist says that, but really get a journal. But journaling doesn't have to look like it looks for someone else. It can be
Mhm.
bullet points. It can be, I have clients whose journals are all painting. I have journal
Mm.
people that journal through playlist. It's their music choice, but just
Oh, yeah.
creating a space where you document what you're learning about yourself and
Mhm.
creating a space where you're learning how you best communicate your emotional experience. And sometimes that's actual words, but sometimes that's art, and
Mm.
sometimes that's movement, and sometimes that's um, relationships. And I just encourage people to have it, whether it's electronic or paper. I'm a fan of paper, but have
Yeah.
a space that you dedicate to you. I love the brain, and I think the brain needs tangible visuals of what
Yes.
you're working on. And having a space that's visual that says, this is me. This is
Mhm.
what I'm doing to get to know me, I think is really important. It's a representation visually of the time and investment you're starting to take on yourself.
Oh my gosh. It just comes back to the find what works best for you message that I always try to share in every single episode, because it really is one about exploring some of these different strategies, right? Because if you're just starting to learn about yourself, you're going to have to try some of these new things to see what
Mm.
is the best way for you. And in some situations, it may be taking pen to paper and journaling. And in other situations, it could be music. I'm not gonna lie, Taylor Swift's new album with her song I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, literally have that shit on repeat throughout the day because I'm like, I get people telling me all the time, like, you're always smiling. And it's like, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, I am. And so it really struck home with me. Yeah, anyway, we could tangent on that all day.
I
But
I have I have one more additive, and it's
yes.
a behavioral one, and I'm sure you guys talk about it a lot. Don't mean to be repetitive, but
No.
in yoga, there is a pose called Shavasana, and it
Ugh.
is quite literally laying on the floor,
Mm,
and you don't do anything in that pose. It's a
right.
pose of active rest, and I
Mhm.
think that that's a really nice overlap of our conversation of
Mhm.
finding grace, finding your load of laundry, but that rest can be active. And so
Mm,
often when we're weighted down by anxiety or pain or PTSD symptoms or heartbreak, we don't want to be going to that hit class that we used to go to or we were trying to get back to. And there's so much beauty that can happen in active rest. And it also is kind of a, I don't know, birds with one stone kind of thing because you're
gosh, yes.
engaging your muscles, you're spending time alone with
Yeah.
yourself,
Mhm.
and you're giving yourself permission to just be rather than to do.
Right.
And it's also gets at that avoidance piece that I am actively doing something, but it's safe and it's held and it's contained, but it's
Mm,
also an invitation for internal exploration.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And something I'm just now realizing is we didn't share the types of attachment styles. Would you be able to do like a really quick rundown of what each of those kind of look like?
I could, but I feel like my answer to that is always that robs you of the self exploration. And what,
Ooh, oh my gosh. This is
because
powerful.
there's so much out there that you can just go and see it. And I would
Yeah.
much rather invite people to think about before they go into this. I like an exercise that's like a appetizer before you
Yeah.
learn about your attachment style, and it's setting the stage and setting the scene to think about when I think about my caregivers, what were the words I would use to describe
Mm.
how we interacted around emotions. And
Ooh.
I think that's what I'd like to use my little bit of time for is when you think
Yes.
about your caregivers, how available were they when you were sad? How available were they when you were scared or embarrassed?
Mm.
Did you come together in your emotions? Were you left alone to manage your emotions? Was there just no space for your emotions because your role was to be available to hold your parents' emotions?
Mm.
How did your parents respond to your needs? Did they get it? Were they uncomfortable? Did it always push them to anger? Were
Mm.
they distant? Were they preoccupied with something else in their lives that they were not available? And how did the way that they responded to your emotions influence you? Do you find yourself more worried about working to keep people around and making sure that you're taking care of their needs?
Mm.
Do you find yourself more at ease when you're by yourself and self-protected? When somebody needs you emotionally, do you get the ick? Are you like, "Ugh, I need you to figure this out." Do you
Right.
know how to ask for what you need without feeling scared that you're a burden or you're an inconvenience? Do you sometimes feel all of those things at the same time? I want to go, I don't want to go. I'm here, but now I'm scared.
Mm.
Which is, by the way, a little layout of all the attachment styles without the titles,
Right.
to have people sit in what they think that description is, because it's also a trap to intellectualize it. Because
Right.
if I tell you this is avoidance, then you walk away with the message of I'm avoidant, instead of wanting to learn yourself and your emotional story and building that relationship with vulnerability. So before you go and take that test, maybe listen to those reflective prompts
Mm.
and decide for yourself what you think your attachment style is. And then go into getting the cognitive piece that gives you a label, because that first part is the important part. The label is the easy part. And we can
Right.
get lost in doing that important part because we just want to get to the label.
Right. Oh my gosh, that's so true. Oh, that was so great. So, listeners, there you go. Go do some self exploration after this episode, build those insights, because we always have a lot to learn about ourselves, because every single chapter of our lives is different, all of our experiences. So, yeah, there's a lot for us to learn out there. Well, Annalise, thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy with us today. We have been wrapping up all of our guest episodes by asking, what does healthy living doesn't have to suck mean to you? Or how do you bring it into your life and work?
I think that the word suck is such a word of like, this is awful. Like I'm averse to it. In healthy living, I I think I sound like a broken record, but I think it's the more you learn your version of healthy living, the more it is this reinforcing wonderful thing that happens where
Mm.
it becomes enjoyable and fun and sometimes sexy and flirty and exciting and adventurous. And there's so much more, to go back to that idea of duality, that if you
Right.
just focus on the hard, you're really minimizing and dismissing what healthy living is. Because
Mm.
healthy living is also laughter. Healthy living is also relationship. Healthy living is not just, I don't know, being on a Stairmaster for 8 hours,
Ew.
which is what I think people think. And so it's really
Yes.
about, the idea of health is the idea of safety. And
Mm.
safety is always something to lean into, and finding out what makes me feel safe in my skin and in my body and with the people around me. That's what healthy living doesn't have to suck mean. Forget about the hard and learn really what healthy means to you.
Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. Oh, what a way to wrap up this episode. And for our listeners who want to connect with you after this, what are some of the places that they can find you and your workbook?
Yeah. So if you also want to get started on some self exploration, I do a weekly blog and it's very digestible. It's like, here's a little bit of information, but it's all about those reflective questions. So you can see that, as well as all of my services, on my website, which is www.amcthepractice.com. And that's where you will learn more about my background, but also a link to Grief is Fucking Hard, which is available on Amazon, also where that blog lives. And then I try to do digestible content about attachment on TikTok and about grief. I'm not great at social media, but I try to be as regular as I can. But I'm very accessible. So if you want to reach out or send a message, I welcome learning about you and how anything that I've put out into the world has impacted you.
Amazing. I'll link all of that in the show notes so that way y'all can find her easily and be able to see all of her amazing content that is available and accessible. Annalise, thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate your time, energy, value, and knowledge that you've shared with us. So I know the listeners are going to walk away from this one and be like, woo, we got some work to do.
Well, we're all in good company together. And will close with, welcome to being human.
Oh, I love that so much.
Thanks for
All
having me.
right. Change makers, we will catch you next time. Annalise, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. I hope you all enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. And don't forget to grab your freebie with the wellness wheel at healthylivingdoesn'thavetosuck.com/wellness so you can get started on your changemaker journey today. As always, thanks so much for listening, Changemakers. And if you can please remember to head to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe, rate, and review. It will help this podcast reach other changemakers so they can start listening and tuning in each week. As a quick, friendly reminder, the information in these podcasts are always strictly for educational purposes only. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.